Hi, so today's video is addressed to people who are interested in didactics for whatever reason, to teachers, to students of didactics, or to people who are simply interested in this matter. And what I'm going to do is I will introduce a concept of mine. It's probably a little bit exaggerated to call it a concept. It's rather a sketch of a concept, a sketch of a theory. So it's just an idea of someone who actually has almost no idea of didactics, who is who never studied it besides maybe a TEFL course, who never really thought about it, but who stumbled into it somehow, just by thinking. Just came across this topic, and as someone who is interested in basically everything, I just started to think, oh, that is interesting. I don't agree with today's curriculum. I don't agree with the way things are taught and with the content of teaching in current schools and other education systems. So I'm going to introduce this sketch of a concept about a curriculum and a little bit about a way of teaching, but more mainly about the curriculum. And I call this concept LMMP, short for Language, Mathematics, Music, and Physical Education. The reason is I try to distill the curriculum down to four main fields. As I just said, language, mathematics, music, and PE. And the reason I do this, of course, there are other subjects too, like history, biology, physics, informatics, and so on. They will appear later in my concept. But for now, I want to concentrate on these four fields, and I want to explain you why I chose them. There is an idea or a concept that I heard from Eric Weinstein. If you don't know him, Google him. It's very interesting to listen to him, and he often says, he often uses the word first principle thinking. Yeah. So what does he mean by that? I don't know, because he never really exemplifies it, but I believe what he means is, well, boiling down what you say, tracing back what you say to first principles, and never just jiggle with terms you don't really understand or you haven't traced back as far as possible. And I try to apply this concept to my curriculum. Alright, so what are, for example, first principles? You could say, I would argue that logic is, or the rules of logic, the axioms of logic are one first principle or a set of first principles. So you have the syllogisms, and you can play around and say A and B and B and C, and so is I don't know, whatever, you make your conclusions. Okay, so you can use this also for language. Some people do that, but it's very limited. Its application for language is very limited, and it cannot be the only set of first principles. there must be others, in my opinion. If you have if you just use syllogisms or logic as first principles, you will have a very narrow perspective on the world. So you can use these principles of logic and so on, and some other axioms for mathematics. Okay, you can build the whole system of mathematics on these first principles, even though, of course, there are some paradoxes coming up if you go too deep, but let's leave it at that first, okay? So, mathematics, check. How about language? What kind of first principles do you have in language? You have, well, you have certain terms that you cannot trace back any further. Well, okay, the classic example is God, and yeah, if you have the term table, okay, you can kind of analyze this term and say a table is made out of wood and it's assembled with screws and so on and so forth. You can analyze it, you can trace it back somehow. That's not a first principle. So God could be a first principle if you want. So you can think of many others, and of course it's not easy to define them. It's actually impossible to define them, but you can try, and you can the attempt to trace back the language you use to first principles as far as possible is, in my opinion, well, all you can do, the best you can do. So you build your language, you build your rhetorics, your speaking, your argumentation, you build it on these first principles. If you just, as I said, jiggle, it will not get you anywhere. And if you want to use language in any way, if you want to analyze a text, if you want to interpret a speech of a president for whatever it is, you need these first principles. Otherwise, you will be fooled by language. You will be tricked, because it's very easy to be tricked by language. So it is important, if you want to be educated, to learn to understand language and to understand how to trace it back to first principles. Okay, you have language and you have mathematics. I think everyone agrees that these two fields are very basic and very, very important for everyone's life. Do you have more first principles? In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, for example, music provides another set of first principles. It's not easy for me to explain this, because actually I'm not my understanding of music is very limited, but you cannot really analyze music, for example, with language or with mathematics, with numbers. You cannot just take it apart into some code. Okay, maybe you can do that, but it loses its properties and it loses its magic. And in general, I think music is not cannot be further analyzed. It's just what it is. It's an experience, a state of your body and a state of your mind and your soul. So I think having music as an additional well, lens to see the world, to experience the world, to your cold mathematical analysis, and you're also rather cold rhetoric language skills is, I think, very important. And if you look back in history, let's say 100 years ago or 200 years ago, it was often said that there was often you know, the cold and pragmatical and mathematical, scientific-oriented father in the family, uh, to use this old-fashioned role model. And there often was a musically and artistically talented mother or interested mother. So the mother played, for example, piano or violin, and the father knew how to build a house and how to, you know, just calculate the um, whatever you want. So you had this mix in education, and a lot of great minds of the recent 200 years, I believe, um, came out of this mix of a musical mother and a scientific father, or maybe the opposite, if you want to put it more feministic. Um, so I think music is important, and I think mathematics is important, and language is important, and all three of them provide first principles. And then we have physical education. Okay, I think it's um, hard to argue against that the body is something that cannot be substituted by language or mathematics or music. Um, the experience of your body in certain, in different states of being is something that you cannot substitute. And it's important for everyone's development to have a kind of uh, balanced and well-formed relationship with your body. Um, so, is there anything else? Are there other first principles, other fields of that could yield first principles? You could argue, for example, you could say that the realm of images somehow provides other first principles. There has been a movement in the humanities called iconic turn that says, you know, the images and videos have become so important in our modern times because of social media that we need to understand them. We need to make a science of interpretation and analysis of these new media and how we deal with it. So you could argue that images are another offer other first principles, but then I think we have to reduce it. We have to reduce our curriculum to some basic fields, to not let it proliferate everywhere without any limits. We have to set some limits, and I think that these four fields are quite. I think you can argue that they are definitely the most important fields. They offer the most important first principles, and well, you can argue about it. It's not what I want to do now, because I want to get further into the details of the different subjects and how they derive from each other. So this is just a concept, this is just a sketch. So if you want to argue against it or about it, just comment in the comment section below. I would be happy about it. All right. So the next step is the the derivation or the derivative subjects. So let me take an example. History, okay? History is, as you can see in the picture below, language. What does that mean? It means that it is somehow derived from language. You can do history, study history, understand history with the means of language, with the first principles of language. If you read an old text, you have to interpret the text, and yeah, you don't need so much mathematics, you don't need so much music, and definitely no PE. So maybe a little bit of image interpretation is also important for history, but let's leave it at that. Okay, so I think it's obvious that history is can be derived from language, and so it is a secondary topic. It should not have the same status as language or mathematics, even though it's very important. Or let's take another example, biology, which is in the picture somewhere between language and mathematics, but closer to mathematics. Well, it's undoubtedly that you use a lot of language in biology, but you also use a lot of mathematics, you use a lot of statistics, and a lot of chemistry and physics plays into biology. So you cannot do without numbers anymore. Not today. Maybe 200 years ago, but not today. And I could go on. I could tell you about physics and informatics and foreign language studies, philosophy, and so on. But I will do that in the next section, in the next slides. So I think you get the idea. And one last thing I want to mention is the projects. I think just learning all this by heart and learning all the theory will not satisfy the students and will not make them really understand what they are learning. So I believe that practical application of these fields is very necessary and important, and should take a considerable amount of the teaching time or of the classroom time. So we can, of course, talk about the details later, but first of all, let's state that projects are very important, and they should be conducted freely as possible, as restricted as necessary. And I think that's it for the first slide, and in the next slides I will go into more detail for the different fields and subjects. Okay, first point is language. Of course, spoken language is our most important mean for communication and understanding the world. I think that's self-explanatory. We use language for almost everything, and we use it to order the world and to perceive the world in some sense, because we put everything into language. Almost everything. For almost everything we need language as a tool to understand, including mathematics. Right, okay, so we don't just use language in itself, we also use language to understand other things that are in themselves not language based, like mathematics. We cannot learn mathematics without language. We have to teach it somehow by explaining the concepts in language. There is no other way. Maybe there are some savants, like I think Benoit Mandelbrot was one of the guys who learned mathematics or understood mathematics more in a visual way than via language, but that's an exception. Okay, our perception of the world is in large filtered through language. Becoming aware of this fact, reflection on language, and the mastering of language is important for our self-development, for our career, and for our mental stability. Well, that's a big point. Many points in one point. So the key point is our world is filtered through language. We create an image of the world in our brain, and we transform every experience, everything we see, learn, hear, smell, and so on. We try at least to put all of these inputs into some kind of language to make it, to make it well formed, to give it a shape, because the experience in itself is unshaped. It doesn't have a shape, and if you put it into language, it gets a shape, and you can categorize it. You can somehow include it into the order of your world, and to understand this and to reflect on this fact is important to understand yourself, your place in the world, and so on. Like some people say, use the metaphor of the fish in the water. So like language is like the water that the fish swims in. We're not aware that we're swimming in, that the fish is not aware that it's swimming in water, and we are not aware that we are constantly in a kind of medium of language. Yeah, and of course it's also important for our career and for our mental stability, because if we don't understand it, and it can play tricks on us. Language can play tricks with us. So we have to become kind of superior to language, at least in some way. It's not completely possible to be superior to it, but I think you can approach this state. Okay, show the manifold ways to use language, for example, storytelling, writing, rhetorics, debating, algorithm-like explanations, jokes, poems, songs, and small talk. This is not something new. We already apply this in our schools. So it's important to show the different aspects of language, the different applications, and the diversity of language, because everyone has different preferences, and some people like poems, and some people are more like logical, algorithmic like thinking, and yeah, it's important to understand that there are different ways to use language in different circumstances, to grasp different things, to formalize or put different things into language. You need to use different formats, let's say. And the last point, incorporate other parts of the curriculum into the language practice. Okay, that is one part that is that I mention in almost every field or subject I will introduce here. It's basically means just interdisciplinary teaching. If you learn about the philosophy of the ancient Greek philosophy, at the same time you can use this topic somehow in your language teaching. Use a text from Plato or from Sophocles, and so on. That's what I mean by this point, interdisciplinary teaching. Okay, next we have mathematics. We live in a time of information and data, and to some degree also still in a time of engineering and technical gimmicks. If we don't want to become the slaves of this development, it is important for us to understand it and to influence it. For example, interpreting statistics and reading code. Yes, I think the current times force us really to learn mathematics, to understand mathematics, or to just become a second or third class citizen, or maybe not a citizen at all. You you need to understand statistics if you want to be ahead of the fake news. You just need to understand statistics. You need to be able to interpret papers and statistics and so on. That is very important. And maybe even more important, you need to be able to read code. Okay, just so many things work in code today, and it is so important for your career and for everything to be able to understand code, read code, write code. It should be introduced quite early, and I will get to this later. Okay, apart from that, mathematics is also a realm of beauty and fascination. It is connected to many other fields like physics, informatics, philosophy, biology, and music. Yeah, so it's not just connected to these fields, it's somehow the mother of all these fields, because it's a field of first principle, and the other subjects are somehow derived from it. So this is an important point, and also the aspect of beauty, because not all children, but many children are really fascinated by mathematics, by the by the notion of, for example, infinity, or zero, or fractals, and so many things that you can use to trigger the natural curiosity and of young children and older children. So in a very pragmatic way, even if you don't believe in the beauty, that the beauty of mathematics is somehow something substantial, something that can lead you somewhere, you can at least, let's say, exploit this fact that mathematics is perceived as something beautiful, to educate the children, and to make it more interesting for them to learn. And the last point, offer students a theoretical and an applicational path. Yes, I think there are students who love to go into the theory, and just are fascinated by numbers and prime numbers, and they cannot get enough of the theory and don't give a F about the application. And there are others who completely don't understand this theoretical stuff, and they want to apply it, and that's fine too. And so you should offer something for both kinds of people. Music. Okay. Music is special because it offers us a great interface for our body, our mind, and our soul. This is a quite esoteric sounding sentence, but I believe it is true. It is very unique in this sense, because there is, I think, no other thing that connects these three things, and it is in this way very important for our self-development, for our for our to keep ourselves together, let's say, because if you're just mathematic focused, you will miss out so much, and you will become very narrow-minded and very like well, a little bit, maybe a little bit weird and a little bit stiff, and you lose the connection to your body, and so on and so forth. So and the same other or similar problems you get if you're language centered. So yes, I strongly advocate that music uh, does this, and um, it should be used to keep us together. Even though I cannot further explain it, but I'm sure there are people who can. Um, so if you can, please comment below. I would love to hear a better explanation than mine. It offers a more direct way to express and cope with our emotions than a language. Yes, I think that's also true. If you want to talk about, if you have certain feelings and certain issues, psychological issues, it's a much, in many cases, a much more direct and more efficient way, more uh, to deal with these feelings, to express the feelings, and to yeah, to find yourself somehow mirrored in this music. It has connections to language and to mathematics, right? Of course, you can sing in language, in music. You can use language to accompany the music, and music has some mathematical properties that can be used as an interdisciplinary um, tool to connect the curriculum. And even though this is, as I said, not um, you cannot reduce it to language, or you cannot reduce it to mathematics. It is something unique, um, something first, um, and it is neutral by nature and ubiquitous. I'm sorry. Um, so yeah, you cannot argue that music is somehow I don't know, biased, and or maybe you can. Of course, there are borderline cases like Wagner and his um, way of putting somehow violence into his music and so on. You can argue, but it's as neutral as it gets, I would say, and it is ubiquitous because it appeals in some way to all of us, to all human beings, from the Rapa Nui in Polynesia uh, to the Western Europe and Japan and so on. Even though we have um, different styles of music, um, it connects on some level all of us. Okay, now just a few words to physical education. PE should include a broad range of offers for the students to choose from. Um, for example, team sports, athletics, conditioned sports, martial arts, relaxation, concentration practices like meditation or yoga, and also dancing. Yes, I think it should offer these different ways of doing PE. Even though, of course, it's hard to offer this um, practical way to everyone, but I think everyone has different needs, and some people want to uh, get rid of their aggressions, and they like to do martial arts, and it helps them to build their character, so to say, and other people are in need of meditation or yoga and or dancing, and it helps them. And mm, it should not physical education should, in my opinion, not just be a way to keep your body fit, to keep yourself in shape. Um, it should be a field of self experience, and um, yeah, then you can move on from this experience and develop yourself in the way you want to develop yourself. If you want to go into conditioned sports, do that. If you want to go into martial arts, do that, and so on. All right, next point is history. So we're in the realm of the derived subjects now, not the first principle subjects anymore. History. Use storytelling as a mean of education. Um, of course, telling stories appeals to most children if it's done well, and it can be just used to trigger the curiosity of the children. If you tell a story well, they will be interested in basically everything, no matter if it's ancient Greece or if it's the French Revolution or the Third Reich or whatever it is. Stories are the key to to remember and to understand history and basically everything. So you should make use of this in your teaching. Emphasize the connection within a certain period of time. For example, show that politics, economy, technical progress, and art and philosophy are interdependent without being too intellectual, of course. Show connections to other parts of the curriculum. Yes, I think that's very important to show to show a pattern within history. It's not a coincidence that you have a certain kind of art in the period of the late 18th century. There is a connection between this kind of art and the Industrial Revolution and the political thoughts that are coming up at this time, and the economy, and so on. Everything is interdependent. And this is also, if you show it in the right way, if you bring it forward to the students in the right way, something that will appeal to them, I believe. Don't center too much on European history. Try to incorporate China and other parts of the world as much as possible. Yes, I do believe that's right, even though I also believe that it's not 100% possible to be like a to distribute your history teaching over all parts of the world. You you should definitely integrate China and India as the two other big old like cultures, high cultures that developed parallelly to our Western Occidental culture. You should definitely show, at least with one example, that there is something else out there that is as complex as our history, as our culture, maybe even more complex, and yeah, you should find a way to do it without spending too much time on it, because of course you want to go deep into certain aspects of our own history. You want to go deep into the issue of the French Revolution, which is completely not part of the Chinese history. Chinese people don't care about the French Revolution. But yeah, you need to go deep into certain topics to understand how history works. You need to exemplify it at certain periods and so on and so forth. But you cannot show every period with the same depth and intensity. All right, don't center too much on recent history, make more space for the far past. Yes, okay, that's kind of commentary on current teaching, current history curriculum in Germany, because we concentrate definitely too much on the last 80 years, let's say, and yeah, we should go rather for curiosity, in my opinion, than for importance for or political importance for our time. Students should not be taught a certain a certain interpretation of our current time and how it all came to be. They should be taught stories. They should be taught facts and stories, and then it's up to them to develop their own worldview, even though I know, of course, that this is an ideal and it will not be possible in the specific class. So just try to use it as an orientation, as an ideal. The next point is foreign languages. Okay, teach English as the first, second language if it is not the native language already. I believe that English is the most important language of our time, and it will stay the most important language of our time for a considerably long time. So you should learn it and do it thoroughly. Try to make them become fluent. So it is just, I think, inevitable to speak fluently English if you want to get somewhere in this world. Offer as many languages as possible, but concentrate on the ones that are widely spoken, like Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, and so on. Yeah, there should be a wide offer of languages like the ones just mentioned, because, first of all, there are still people who don't speak English. If you want to go to China, if you want to live in China for whatever reason, maybe the world forces you to do so, maybe you want to do so, you should be able to speak Chinese, because English is not such a big thing there, okay? Spanish, yeah, of course, the whole southern part of and central part of America speaks Spanish, with an exception of Brazil, and the Arabic world is also growing. And yeah, but there are other languages. There is Russian, there is Portuguese, there is Japanese and Korean and Swahili. There are so many languages, and you should, in your foreign language studies, you should show your students the fascination and the incredible diversity of the realm of languages. There are about 6,000 languages spoken on this planet, and every one of them is complex and fascinating and has its own roots and its own nuances and so on, and they are related to each other in a complex way. They are like species in biology. They are they make up families of languages, and they trace back to common ancestors, and so on and so forth. This is an incredibly interesting topic that can also just be a trigger for the curiosity of students, and of course also the topic of etymology, which is basically inclusion of the storytelling aspect into the foreign language studies. Okay, the next topic is a little bit of a complicated case. It's philosophy, and I bring this subject forward with a certain hesitation, because philosophy opens doors, or at least potentially opens doors, can open doors that lead to quite dark places. And if you want to teach philosophy, you have to consider, you have to calculate that your students might be, well, their worldview might be confused by going too deep into certain philosophical topics. And you know, you should be very cautious if you teach it. I don't say no, but it can give you a certain methodology, because if you don't, if you just wildly think in all different directions and you don't have the methodology, you are even more in trouble, let's say. So I think it's a good idea to give them the methodology and to give them some basic knowledge, but um, I wouldn't go too deep into these topics, because it can get out of control. And the next subject is the world and its cultures and landscapes. Well, the title is not really catchy. I just made this title up, as well as I made this subject up. Is just an idea of mine, and you can say that it's unnecessary or wrong to put all these things together, but I will explain my idea. The focus of the subject is to stimulate curiosity for the world and all its aspects. Yeah, so I know there is a subject called geography. Geography just teaches you the names of countries and the names of rivers and tectonic plates and oceans and capitals and so on. There is no connection to the real world whatsoever. It is terribly dry and uninteresting, even though it could be so interesting um, if you embed more of the aspects of these places and countries in the world. Okay, so if you learn that, for example, China, you know, has a 5,000-year-old culture, and that it has so many different landscapes, from the Himalaya to the deserts, and the dry the rice field areas, and so on and so forth. It's such a diverse um, country in many aspects, and you have the language and um, the food and so many aspects of a country that belong together and that should be, in my opinion, taught together. So I my idea is that that the lessons should be conducted in a freer and more easygoing fashion. There should be a lot of interaction with the students. There should also be a lot of material and activities like pictures, videos, songs, cooking, and so on. Lessons could be conducted, for example, as a theme party, just gathering together with the students and dressing in a certain way and in a traditional way of the place you're talking about, watching a movie, eating food from the country, cooking together. I know it's hard to put into reality, but I think it would be great if you had the resources and the motivation of the teacher to do so. So that's my idea. Tell me what you think about it. I'm curious to know. Physics. Physics provides the most fundamental description of the natural world. It is fundamental for the understanding of chemistry, and many processes of the natural world would remain in the realm of mystery without it. Physics is difficult for many students, and the content should be exemplified with many experiments and projects. Written protocols should be used early to deepen the understanding and to show scientific workflow and principles. Yeah, I think that physics is a good subject to make the students familiar with um, the methods and the workflow of actual science, even though not in this serious context, but in a more playful way. And of course, physics is important, very important. It's also a good example to show how it's derived from mathematics, and a little bit derived from language, because you need language to explain certain concepts, and especially something like the quantum theory is kind of, if you do the math, it's easy to understand, but if you try to really understand it, the meaning of it, you need language, and you get into some very, very weird places. Informatics. The importance of informatics hopefully doesn't need further explanation. Yeah, I think that's obvious. It should be introduced early in a playful manner. Yeah, there are many offers of apps and programs that introduce coding to small kids, at least like 10 years or 12 years. It should be possible to teach sixth graders informatics. Students should have enough freedom to code for themselves with the guidance of the teacher. Yes, it's good to be free to do your own projects. If you want to code a little game, you should be able to do so, but you should have the guidance of someone who knows how it's done. Bigger projects and certain tasks should be encouraged to broaden the range of skills and to overcome plateaus. Yeah. So if you just always do your own things and you do it all on your own, you will not improve much. So it's good to encourage these projects to also to imitate a little bit the actual work environment, for example, in a company. But maybe that's not for everyone, so it should not be mandatory. Actual teaching should be conducted as little as possible. Yes, I think it should be done, but in the end, the practical aspects of coding of informatics is so much more important, at least in an early stage. If you're into informatics and you want to study it later at university, then of course the theory becomes important. Biology is another good example for a subject that just naturally triggers young children's curiosity, because there are so many different, so many different weird creatures, and beautiful creatures, and terrible creatures, terrifying creatures, and so many weird concepts in biology, of ways of living and so on. So you should use that, and knowledge should be integrated rather organically than by dry memorization lessons, even though it's an important part. Yes, so you should try to teach the knowledge you want to teach rather by, well, in a context, in a story, for example, or maybe in a movie to show its actual connection to the world, to other parts of nature, and to show that everything, that everything is connected, especially in biology and ecology. That's such an important insight, especially in our times. Excursions should be a part of the curriculum. Experiencing nature and animals isn't just of educational value, it also teaches respect for creation and puts one's own life in perspective. It is, I believe, a thing that is missing today. Young kids just, as you know, play with their smartphones and so on, they live in the big city and they don't experience nature. And as well as I know that it's very difficult for schools in the middle of downtown New York to conduct these excursions, it should be at least tried. And why not use I don't know, virtual reality? Maybe there are it's better than nothing. Collections and projects like a herbarium should be encouraged. Yeah, so also a good way uh, to do a project, to apply your knowledge in with different aspects. You know, show show make a gather leaves of trees and learn about the taxonomy from Linné and about the etymology of the names and about the relations and about between the you know um, the families and so on. It's such a great way to have a interdisciplinary project. And yeah, the teaching about our own body and the outer nature should be well balanced. Yeah, it's important to understand our own body, the processes that are going on in our brain, in our stomach, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, it's as important, or maybe more important, to understand all the other parts of nature. Next up is chemistry. You can disagree with me, but I think chemistry should not be a full mandatory subject. It should rather be, for example, a 1 week course inside of biology with the option of further continuation as a free choice class. I think so because it is, I believe, very far away from first principles. Everything that's happening in chemistry can be, well, at least in principle, easily derived. Of course, there's a lot to learn. There's a certain logic in the language of chemistry and so on. It's a huge field, of course, but I think it's not important for young learners to get deep into chemistry. You can do it in your university. And yes, I understand that chemistry is important for many jobs. There are a lot of people who want to go into pharmacy and medicine and biotechnology and so on, but still, I think that's an aspect of career, of preparing you for your career. That's not an aspect of education. So I think it can be postponed to a certain degree. And it should be up to the student to decide whether he or she wants to go deeper into this topic or not. Art. Art should include all physical art forms like paintings, sculptures, and many others. The history of art should play into the normal creative process without forcing it on them. So you should not teach them how painters in the Renaissance changed their perspective and so on. It should be rather organical part of the process of creating and learning by creating. It should also include filmmaking. This gives children who are surrounded by films and videos every day a better perspective and makes them less susceptible to advertisement and social media. Yes, I think that's a good idea to teach them to make a movie together. It could be a great project to learn, because it includes so many different aspects of life, of the world. So it includes pictures, it includes movement, it includes time, it includes the technical aspect of um, using your camera and editing the video. It also teaches teamwork. If you make a movie, you basically cannot make it on your own. You need a team. Yeah, you can think of many other ways to or many other things to include into your art classes. Make them free. Um, make them just as encouraging as possible. Now, to end this little presentation, a few general points. The education process brings many people and issues together, what makes it extremely complex and difficult to realize, even if there is a great theory behind it. Yes, I just want to say that I'm aware of that. It's one thing to think of some theory or concept, can be great, can be awesome, but in the end it's impossible to implement, impossible to put into reality. So that doesn't stop me though from bringing forward my concept, because I think every concept should be, or at least every concept that seems promising should be considered and tested and tried to, if it's a really good concept, it should be tried to put it into reality, and then we can see if it works or not, or if it works to some extent or not at all, or so the choice of teachers is of course crucial for the outcome. If they lose their motivation or don't have motivation to begin with, everything will fall apart. Yes, that is one aspect of the putting a concept into reality. Teachers are one part of that. If you have good teachers, great teachers actually, you can do great education, and sometimes even with a shitty curriculum, but if they're not motivated, if it's not in their heart, I think it's very difficult to put at least my concept of education into reality. This concept should deliver good results for most students and is not designed for just a few highly motivated students. However, if the general motivation or capacity of the students falls below a certain threshold, it will affect teachers and motivated students. It should be an objective to prevent this from happening. Okay. Yes, so it's not an elitary concept. That's not the way I designed it or thought of it. It should be an inclusive concept, not 100%. There will be like good ones and bad ones and so on, but it is an open concept. And well, if the students don't play along, if they are not triggered, if they cannot be, if their curiosity cannot be awakened, and maybe the general atmosphere in the class is not open enough, and you can use many words here, it will be difficult. The administrative structure of the school should leave room for teachers to breathe and to be creative. Yeah, administration should not be part of the teacher's job. They have enough difficulties in class. They should be as free as possible, even though, again, I know it's not easy. And 3 more points. Patterns should be an essential part of conveying knowledge and meaning. It should be the teacher's task for every subject to create or show as many interfaces or to other parts of the curriculum as possible, and to show reoccurring patterns of content and structure. Yeah, so even though the way I introduced this concept of a curriculum, the curriculum seemed rather hierarchical, because you have these 4 first principle fields, and then you have other fields that are derived from them. But there are always connections, there are always patterns um, that you find reoccurring in physics, in biology, in a language, and so on and so forth. You find fractal patterns, you find cyclic patterns or linear patterns, whatever you want. This is or patterns that you cannot describe mathematically, rather like a language patterns. Triggering curiosity is essential. Of course, it's essential. It's part of the teacher's job. It's part of the design of the lesson plan, of the material. It is crucial, definitely. Okay, and last point, in general, follow the motto as strict as necessary and as free as possible, and adjust it to every class and student. Alright, this is an old motto, it's not my invention, but it should be a motto always kept in mind when designing classes and curriculum and being in action as a teacher. Alright, that's it so far. I'm very curious to read your comments and your thoughts and ideas.